Hello everyone, this is Mr. Brass, and today we'll be going over responsibilities and intentions. Moral principles and ethical theories affect many areas of life, and it isn't founded on just good and bad, but also choice, intention, and responsibility. Causal determination, as I have mentioned before, undermines reality of choice and responsibility. We must make a good distinction between intended and unintended, along with involuntary and voluntary actions. What makes a compulsion unintentional is a simple physical constraint. An intentional action is an act that is both directly intended and carried out for its own desire or to meet a desired end. One can only intend to do something one believes one can and will do. It doesn't need to be performed on its own, but it has to accompany an activity that does it. One can attempt to do something where the causal process ensures that some action is fulfilled, but it doesn't fulfill the intention. An action is voluntary if it is directly intended, aka allows the agent to move toward fulfilling an intention. We tend to have a rule of responsibility that aligns with our legal tradition of mens rea, and the rule is an agent is responsible for all and only his intentional actions. This law can be diverged from, as we do hold people responsible for unintended actions. To talk about responsibility, determinism has to be brought up as it undermines it. As J.L. Mackie describes determinism, the determinist thesis is that for every event there is an antecedent sufficient cause, that is, a temporally prior set of occurrences and conditions which is sufficient in accordance with some regularity for just such an event and which leads to it by a qualitatively continuous process. This could be falsified if two antecedent situations that were alike in all relevant ways had different outcomes. Determinism can be supported by the fact that voluntary human actions requires motives, and the explanation of an act via motives is in itself a causal explanation. We also know that all physical states and events are causally determined, like the states of the brain, and can be correlated in a way a certain mental state will occur. Let's deal with certain objections. Quantum mechanics shows things behave indeterminately. We have no idea currently if the indeterminacies found in it apply to large structures for brain states. However, indeterminism doesn't get you free will, but rather just reduces things to literal randomness, and you still lack control. Number 2, the experience of freedom. It is said that if determinism were true, why would we have this feeling we could have done otherwise? I believe this could have is an assumption and not an experience, which can be explained as the brain showing off its effective nature. Number 3 is Gödel's theorem. Used to show the incompleteness of a certain mathematical system, has also been used to undermine determinism. This fails because at best all it shows is that some human minds aren't closed deterministically and can be changed via provocative inputting, which we already knew. Number 4 undermines judgment. It says we couldn't adopt a belief in determinism and see said adoption as causally determined. This is false because merely being causally determined isn't what undermines belief. That would only be the case if it was determined in an inappropriate way, and it's easy to accept that some of our beliefs that arise causally are determined in inappropriate ways. Also, at best this would only show that you couldn't rationally accept determinism, not that determinism in of itself isn't true. I argue for causal determination and believe that our notion of choice, credit, blame, and responsibility have to be revised. Let's also be clear that determinism isn't fatalism, i.e. that human actions and related outcomes are fixed, regardless of what they do. Determinists allow for weighing the good and bad, along with moral evaluation, but these simply enter into the causal process. The changing of the agent's character can also be determined by pre-existing elements of the agent in question. I allow for the complex processes that are obviously involved in our thinking, but to say that there are antecedent sufficient causes for them. Even partial determinism with certain randomness doesn't allow for ultimate responsibility, as it requires a causally free and yet determinate agent along with an active self, which is hard to imagine. When we ask of the metaphysical self, we come to problems as how can the self act for reasons without being causally related to the decisions it makes? How is the self's actions something other than random occurrences, if not causally of persisting features of it? Well, that is all for today. This is Mr. Brass saying goodbye. Get wise.